Three women, three completely different worlds, and one pop star at the center of a story the internet still argues about like it happened yesterday. People love to reduce Justin Bieber's dating history to one headline: the relationship, the heartbreak, the what if. But if you zoom out, you start to see something more interesting. Selena Gomez, Sofia Richie, and Barbara Palvin didn't just date Justin, they each marked a different version of him. Selena is the chapter most people remember as first love in public. Romance turned into a global conversation where every smile looked like proof and every silence looked like a warning. Sofia is the plot twist people didn't want, criticized from day one, yet quietly connected to a moment when Justin's image shifted from chaos to maybe he's growing up. And Barbara? She's the name that feels like a shadow, brief, debated, and mysterious, the kind of chapter that never gets fully explained, which is exactly why it won't disappear. In this video, we're not just doing a timeline. For each relationship, we'll break it down into 3 layers: how it started and ended, how it affected their careers, and who truly leveled up afterward. And by the end, we'll answer one addictive question. After Justin Bieber, who actually won, emotionally, professionally, and publicly? To understand why Selena and Justin became the relationship people still talk about, you have to remember the timing. They weren't just 2 young celebrities dating. They were 2 massive audiences colliding, Disney sweetness meeting teenage pop star hysteria, while the entire internet was learning how to turn real feelings into endless commentary. When the Selena chapter began, it felt almost cinematic. The good girl, with a calm, grounded image, and the boy who seemed to carry both raw talent and raw chaos at the same time. On the surface, it looked like balance. Selena felt like the steady hand. Justin felt like the storm. And for fans, that contrast was irresistible because it created a story people could root for, the idea that love could soften the edges, that someone stable could anchor someone famous and overwhelmed. Then came the era of public moments that turned their relationship into a global scoreboard. Every appearance became evidence. Every photo became a verdict. If they smiled, it meant they were back. If they didn't post, it meant they were done. The romance stopped being private and became a live broadcast, and the audience didn't just watch, it participated. Shipping turned into pressure. Support turned into expectations, and suddenly, the relationship wasn't only about 2 people anymore. It was about what everyone else needed it to represent. At their peak, Selena wasn't just a couple name, it was a culture. Fans treated the relationship like a shared memory, a collective coming of age. But here's the hidden cost of that kind of fame. When a relationship becomes a symbol, it loses the right to be messy in peace. The more people worship the story, the less room the people inside it have to grow. And that's where the cracks begin to make sense. The relationship didn't break in one dramatic moment. It fractured in a cycle. On again, off again. Hope, disappointment, rumors, reconciliations. And each time the cycle repeated, the public reaction got louder, sharper, more certain. Instead of giving them space to figure it out, the world treated every phase like a final chapter. For Justin, that period was also tied to a larger narrative. A young star struggling under relentless scrutiny, trying to find identity while being watched 24/7. For Selena, it meant carrying her own career, her own image, and, whether she asked for it or not, the role of the one who could save him. That's an unfair role for anyone. And when that burden hits reality, love doesn't feel romantic anymore. It feels like responsibility. So what happens after a relationship like that ends? Here's where Selena's success after becomes the most important part of the story. Because whether people see her as the heartbroken ex or the resilient survivor, Selena built something that didn't depend on Justin's narrative. She moved toward a more mature public identity, less about being a girlfriend in a headline, more about being a complete person with a voice, a brand, and a long-term career. And that shift is the real victory, taking a story that the world tried to own and reclaiming it as one chapter, not the whole book. Selena's chapter with Justin was loud, emotional, and unforgettable. But the version of Selena that came after? That's the version that proved she could stand without the relationship being her headline. And now, the question changes, because if Selena was the love story the world wanted, Sofia Richie was the relationship the world tried to reject. Sofia Richie's chapter with Justin Bieber didn't start with applause. It started with suspicion. By the time Sofia entered the story, Justin's public image had already been through a full storm. Years of relentless attention, messy headlines, and a fandom that felt like it had emotional ownership over his next move. So when people saw him with Sofia, the reaction wasn't neutral. It wasn't, "Oh, interesting." It was judgment, fast, loud, and personal. Part of it was because Sofia didn't fit the approved narrative. She wasn't the childhood sweetheart everyone had already written a movie about. She wasn't a dramatic public romance with a long, emotional history. She was newer, quieter, and, most importantly, she didn't come with the same nostalgic fan attachment. And because she was also young and heavily watched, the relationship quickly became less about what they were doing and more about what the internet decided it meant. But here's what makes this chapter fascinating. Sofia and Justin looked like the first relationship in a long time, where Justin seemed calmer, not perfect, not suddenly healed, but less chaotic, less performative, more like someone trying to breathe. Their vibe was different from the Selena era's emotional roller coaster. This one felt like a low-noise attempt at stability, vacations, private moments, fewer public declarations. And that's why the hate was so intense. Because when a crowd expects drama, peace looks suspicious. People don't know how to click on quiet. They click on conflict. The peak of this relationship wasn't a single iconic moment. It was the controversy itself. Every time they appeared, the internet reacted like it had to decide whether Sofia was good enough, whether she was replacing someone, whether Justin was moving on too fast, whether the relationship was real. Sofia became a lightning rod for a bigger conversation. Not just who Justin dated, but who the public thought he was allowed to date. So where did it crack? The obvious answer is pressure. And yes, pressure matters. But the deeper crack is that a relationship can't be a safe place if the outside world keeps dragging it into the street. When hate becomes constant noise, even normal moments feel like survival mode. You stop building a relationship. You start managing a crisis. And after it ended, Sofia's win wasn't about proving anything to fans. It was about stepping out of the chaos and returning to a path that made sense for her, building her image, her career, and her identity on her own terms, less as Justin Bieber's girlfriend, more as a public figure with her own aesthetic and lane. In the Justin story, Sofia represents a turning point, the chapter where you can see him trying to change direction, even if the world wasn't ready to let him. And then we get to the strangest chapter of all, because if Sofia was controversial in full daylight, Barbara Palvin is the relationship that lives in shadows, brief, debated, and never fully explained. Barbara Palvin's name hits differently in this story because it never comes with a clean timeline. There isn't a neat "they met, they dated, they broke up" arc that everyone agrees on. Instead, her chapter exists in fragments, photos, whispers, fan theories, and that specific kind of celebrity rumor that feels small in the moment, but somehow refuses to die. And that's exactly why it works as the most addictive part of the narrative. Barbara was already building a serious presence in the fashion world, high-profile runway work, editorial credibility, the kind of career that moves in a separate universe from pop music fandom. So when her name appeared next to Justin's, the curiosity wasn't just romantic, it was cultural. People wanted to know, how did these two worlds even overlap? Was it real? Was it a moment? Was it a misunderstanding that got amplified by the internet? The peak of this chapter isn't a romantic highlight. It's the debate. Because when the public doesn't get facts, it fills the gap with imagination, and imagination spreads faster than truth. That's how a short connection can become a long-running mystery, especially when Justin's love life was already one of the most analyzed storylines in pop culture. But here's the key point. Barbara's chapter shows what happens when a rumor meets a fandom that's already emotionally invested. Even a brief connection becomes symbolic, proof of something, betrayal of something, or confirmation of whatever narrative people were already carrying. In a strange way, Barbara didn't need to do much to become part of the story. The story was already hungry. So where does it crack? Timing and distance, two factors that quietly kill a lot of celebrity connections before they ever become official. Different industries, different schedules, different circles. And in Justin's world, where every move became public property, anything that wasn't immediately confirmed was almost guaranteed to turn into chaos. The easiest relationships to destroy are the ones that never had a chance to define themselves. And what about success after? Barbara's success story is the cleanest in one sense. It doesn't depend on Justin at all. Her career lane is built on a different kind of credibility, consistency, global fashion recognition, and momentum that doesn't need a pop star relationship to validate it. In a narrative full of emotional noise, Barbara's chapter feels like a reminder. Sometimes the biggest flex is moving forward without turning your life into a public explanation. And now we're ready for the payoff. Because when you line up Selena, Sofia, and Barbara side by side, the winner changes depending on what you call success. If you put these three relationships on a timeline, it's tempting to rank them like a competition. Biggest love, biggest drama, biggest glow-up. But the truth is, each chapter wins in a different category, because each one reveals a different kind of success. Love impact? Selena's chapter is the deepest scar and the most iconic memory. It's the one people still argue about because it felt like a shared era. Whether you call it destiny or dysfunction, it shaped how the world talks about Justin's love life. Selena and Justin weren't just dating, they became a symbol. And symbols don't fade easily. Public pressure? Sofia took the hardest hit for simply being the wrong choice in the eyes of fans. Her chapter is a case study in how the internet treats women who enter a story that already has a main character couple. And yet, that same chapter also coincides with a quieter version of Justin, less explosive, more controlled, like someone trying to choose peace over passion. Career growth? Selena's post-relationship evolution feels the most visible because the world watched her transform from part of a couple into a full independent headline. Sofia's growth is more lifestyle-driven, less about proving talent, more about building a stable, curated identity that survives public noise. Barbara's is the most detached from the drama. Her career doesn't need this story to be valid, which is its own kind of victory. And then there's personal glow-up. The category people rarely talk about honestly. Because glow-up isn't just looking better or doing better, it's needing less approval. By that definition, the real win isn't keeping Justin or being chosen by the public. The real win is stepping out of the storm with your sense of self intact. So maybe the twist is this. Justin wasn't the prize. The prize was what each woman became after the relationship stopped defining them. So when people ask, which ex mattered most? The honest answer is, it depends on what you mean by mattered. Selena is the chapter that taught the world how powerful a public love story can be, and how painful it becomes when millions of people feel entitled to the ending. Sofia is the chapter that shows what happens when someone tries to choose calm in a life addicted to chaos, whether the internet approves or not. And Barbara is the chapter that proves a connection doesn't have to be loud to leave a shadow. Sometimes mystery is exactly what keeps a story alive. But if there's one takeaway that ties all three together, it's this. The most successful person isn't the one who wins the relationship. It's the one who wins their life back afterward. Now I want to hear from you. Which chapter changed Justin the most? Selena, Sofia, or Barbara, and why? And for the next episode, do you want the full deep dive timeline of Justin's relationships, or the Haley versus the past story that the internet can't stop comparing?